Onto the story now. Geologists are warning that strong tropical cyclones could hit KwaZulu-Natal in the future. An international study led out of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and published in the journal Nature Geoscience has used state-of-the-art techniques to investigate seabed sediments. It has revealed that severe tropical cyclones made landfall on the eastern coast of East Africa in the past. According to UKZN's media release, under projected climate change conditions, these damaging phenomena could arise in the future. To discuss this, we're joined now by the Marine Geology Research Unit at UKZN, Professor Andrew Green. A very good morning to you, Professor, and thanks for making the time.
Good morning. Thanks, Desiree, for having me.
Now, yourself, together with international geologists, conducted an international study led out of UKZN. Tell us more about your findings.
Well, thanks for that, Desiree. Yes. So we started a study, it must have been about 2014, looking at a series of seabed sediments off of Durban. We've done some nice mapping off there and taken some cores, which are basically sediment profiles down into the seabed. And what that revealed is quite interesting. A whole series of broken up shell debris, pieces of small rocks that had been deposited alongside that, big balls of mud, really cohesive mud that had been included along with those. And their signatures from their chemistry, as well as the types of sediments that were found there, pointed to large marine storms that had deposited these sediments. When we started to date these sediments, we found that they came in at about 7,000 to 5,000 years before present. So that's 7,000 years ago. And when we look at sea levels are right up around where they are at present, perhaps a little bit higher, maybe up to 3 meters higher. Interestingly, with that also, when we looked at the timing of these in terms of global climates, and in particular the climates of the Southwest Indian Ocean, we came to the conclusion that sea surface temperatures at the time were also significantly warmer. So what this pointed to is really a series of conditions that could create these supercharged tropical cyclones that were making their way all the way down the Mozambique Channel. So usually, and it's quite funny, I've been following the media in relation to this article we published, and people are like, oh, tropical cyclones are common. Sure, they're common, but they don't ever make landfall here, maybe once or twice in the last 20 or 30 years. But what we're looking at here are storms such greater magnitude compared to even something like Tropical Cyclone Des Moines, which is associated with massive coastal infrastructural damage. So what it all really does is it paints a picture of a fairly alarming scenario that when we say could, in geology, typically that is will. It will arise. We know that sea surface temperatures are warming based on predictions from the IPCC. We know climate is getting to a warmer period, naturally, even without anthropogenic influences, though that certainly is accelerating things. And it's painting quite a dire picture for coastal metropoli like Maputo, like Durban, and like Richards Bay.
Why do you think this work is important?
Well, I always say to my students, and to just people who are interested in geology is based on the idea that the present, what we look at today, is the key to the past. And even more importantly, the past is the key both to the present and to the future. So if we can look at the past and we can see what was happening in the past, what the conditions were that were influencing that past, and we have an idea of how those conditions are going to become more and more prevalent in the future, we can then start to extrapolate on those lines. So we know that we're going to get these big tropical cyclones. And by big, and this is for the people in KwaZulu-Natal who were around in March 2007, that was an enormous storm. That wasn't a tropical cyclone, but it was nowhere near as damaging as a tropical cyclone. And that caused billions of rands of infrastructural damage. What we're looking at here, though, are storms that exceed that by orders of magnitude. Not just a little bit, orders. That's what's left behind in the geological record. And everything points to the fact that those will occur again once sea surface temperatures are warm enough that you can have these tropical cyclones migrating as far south as Durban. So what this does is it puts a very nice picture to town planners and to urban managers in Durban and in places like Maputo and Richards Bay, and maybe even as far south as East London. It's hard to say because we don't have data from there, but these are the sort of things that people need to be making preparations for, along the lines of both sea level rise, as well as the idea that we are going to be getting bigger storms that are coming more and more frequently.
I know that you're outside, but we're just going to play footage from 2007 storms in the KZN, and just tell us what your predicted storms have in relation to this.
So this is quite interesting. These storms that we're seeing now, and I mean, that's devastating. Devastating from infrastructure, from clean water sanitation purposes, from just beach aesthetics, tourism. When we modeled the impact of this storm on the seabed off Durban, it didn't make any effect whatsoever. So it hardly stirred the sediments. Yet the storms that struck between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago stirred the seabed to a depth of about 6 to 8 meters below what it is at present and concentrated nothing but fist-sized pieces of cobble and shells, which indicates massive amounts of energy, far more so than something like this storm and the damage that's been has arisen from a storm like this in March 2007. So it's frightening. It is frightening because it really paints quite an alarming picture of what, and I'm saying may, but as I said, as geologists, may typically means is. We just always have that little bit of uncertainty that we have to hinge on, but very likely that we're going to see these. So, this is something that would have been a mere scratch on the surface compared to what happened in the past.
Of course, this is one of those conversations where we could go on forever, but this is the only time we have. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Marine Geology Research Unit Professor Andrew Green at UKZN. You're watching The Agenda. A quick break. We'll be back in a moment.